Well, hello everyone and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself, Anne Welsh. Today we'll be talking to Dr. Shefali Tsabary. She's a clinical psychologist graduating from prestigious university, Columbia University. She's a well-known author. Her book, The Conscious Parent, is a New York Times bestseller. Oprah described it as one of the most profound books on parenting she's ever read. Her other books include The Awakening Family and Out of Control. She's gone on to write so many books, but today our focus is to talk to her about her new book coming out, A Radical Awakening. Radical awakenings are all to do with helping women to realize their true potential and find their joy, to turn our pain into power, make women to learn to become accountable for various actions happening in their life and use those accountabilities to find our joy. Such a difficult thing to do. The pandemic, as many people have known, has affected more women than it did affect men. More women lost their jobs because women's jobs were mostly in retail and theater, where this was predominantly affected. When you read her book, you find the courage to find your joy. I'll be asking her about why she chose to write this book at this critical time, how this book will be helping many women out there to find their own joy and live their life to the fullest. Most importantly, how they'll be able to turn their pain into power. Meet Dr. Shefali. Hello everyone and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself, Anne Welsh. As I said in my introduction, I have the amazing author here, clinical psychologist, who will be talking to us about her amazing new book. I've read it myself and I can't wait for all of you to read this book. But let's get into it and understand from Dr. Shefali about her new book. How are you?
Hi, Anne. Thank you for having me. And I'm so excited. We're going to talk about A Radical Awakening. We just came out. So thank you for having me on.
I'm so happy because your book, you're an author and you have written so many books. And these books are definitely books that anyone who reads them will definitely see a massive improvement. They'll see ways to improve their lives. I just wanted to find out before we get into any of this, who are you?
Well, at the end of the day, I'm a meditator. And so I really don't have too many attachments to my identity. But on a basic level, I am a clinical psychologist and an author. And I write books on consciousness, many books on conscious parenting, and now this latest book on the liberation and empowerment of a woman.
I love that. Liberation and empowerment of a woman, especially now, because I've spoken to so many leaders. And one of the things they keep saying is that women have been deprived, especially from this COVID pandemic, and it's affected people in numerous ways. But to go into this about you being an author, was it difficult as a woman to find your joy and say, this is something I want to put pen and paper, I want to start helping other women through writing? How did you become an author?
Yeah, I think authors are peculiar creatures where they much prefer writing than talking. So from a young age, I took to the pen quite naturally. And the second thing that authors are peculiar in is that they feel the need to describe their reality, to create a narrative, to have a thread. And many people don't have this need, but I think writers in particular want to express themselves through descriptive analysis. So I saw that in me a long time ago. I had journals, I wanted to write, I wanted to express. But I also did see that because I was a woman, I was always nervous about putting myself out there and truly manifesting my inner knowing. And I always felt shy that, oh, what will people say? Who wants to read what I have to say? And I began to notice, because I was a psychologist, that these voices are very ubiquitous to women in particular, much more than men. And there I began my journey into why we women are particularly disconnected from our voice. So I then began to write about that. And that's what ended up in this book, A Radical Awakening, because it speaks to how we women in particular are trained from childhood to be disconnected to our inner knowing, and we keep walking around our inner knowing like so gingerly, as if it's going to quicksand and swallow us. And this is how we betray ourselves. We do it in everyday minutiae choices: how we criticize ourselves in the mirror, how we don't speak up at a meeting, how we pretend that things are okay with us when they're really not, how we put our kids before us all the time. And in these ways, we betray ourselves and disconnect from our knowing. So, my passion as a psychologist really intermingled with my natural desires as a writer. And that's how I've integrated both those parts of me.
And your beginning books, like I have most of them here, and these books have helped me, and they've guided me through my having my kids, especially the conscious parents. I love that. Why did you focus on parenting and children? Was there a particular reason you wanted to go that direction?
Yes, so like in all my work, it's informed by my own personal journey, but also me being a psychologist. So when I became a mother, I was just, traumatized by the ways in which I was unleashing my unmet expectations on my kid. And I was so against that as a psychologist. I used to teach parents, don't put your expectations on your kids, don't burden your kids with your anxieties. But
Yeah,
here I was doing it.
yeah,
And so then I went into the third area that is key to my life, which is meditation. And I began to integrate my personal journey with meditation principles and psychological principles, which resulted in the first book I wrote called The Conscious Parent, which was really understanding that our childhood wounds create a false egoic personality within us. And then we begin operating in the world out of a false persona, and that I was really a mother out of a false identity of being a mother, and I wasn't operating out of my authentic self. And because I wasn't authentic, I was burdening my child to be inauthentic too. And so I wrote The Conscious Parent because as a psychologist, I understood that our early childhood years are so important. But I finally understood that it wasn't the child's fault. It wasn't the child who was responsible for this. It was the parent who was coming at the child with their own unexplored emotional baggage. And I can tell you, hands down, every mother, every father, until they go through a process of awakening, is doing a royal dumping show on their children of their past issues onto their children. And we know this because this happened to us.
yes.
Our parents did that to us.
Yeah, in one way or the other, it was done to us, but and that behavior we still transfer it down to our own kids, and we just not knowing that it was done to us. I agree.
So my effort in The Conscious Parent was to break that pattern and to wake the parent up that, hey, this is your moment to heal your emotional baggage from childhood. Your kid is yelling at you, and whatever's coming up in you has nothing to do with your kid. It has all to do with your emotional baggage. So that became the revolution in a new way of looking at parenting, no longer about the child, but about the parent's emotional journey.
That like I said, I love the book, and I think it's one of the reason I gave it out to so many people because my if it's just for example, my sister had a baby. I was like, you need to read this because this would just change the way you look at bringing up the kids, whether they're just having the same narrative we have from mom and dad. But that now takes me on to your new book. In light of everything that's gone on in the world, the pandemic, I think this book is the perfect time to come out. And anyone who would just read this book would give you, especially women. I love that it's targeted towards women because women have been so affected during this pandemic. And when you read this book, if you're a woman who's just afraid to do anything, this book shakes you. But let's start with this radical awakening. One of the things I found so powerful is the message in your intro. You said, every radical awakening needs a spark. This spark ignites the eternal self. Without that, none of this. So, what was your own spark on the road of this awakening?
there were many small flames that led to the final spark, but the final spark for me was my realization that I was not living my authentic self. I was truly, literally bearing my true self, and I was doing it intentionally because I was a slave to that false egoic part of me that wanted approval, that wanted to be seen as the good one, that wanted praise for being the best mother and the best wife. And I was a slave to that egoic false part of me, and I was doing it intentionally. When it became so bad that I was literally doing it consciously, that's when I realized that I need to go down another path. I need to start changing my life. You know, it's one thing to be asleep, but it's another thing to know that we are willfully putting ourselves down, willfully betraying ourselves. And when I saw that, it soon became unacceptable to me. And that's when I went through a complete 180 and changed my life and turned everything around. And that was very traumatic. It was very epiphanic, very cataclysmic, catastrophic. But at the end of the day, just like a pandemic is, it's cataclysmic, it's unpredictable, it's traumatic, it's absolutely shocking. And I think that the pandemic is a radical awakening, but it's so scary to go through that birthing canal. And I went through mine, and I've come out a different person with this book to give to women as a gift, that they too can have their own radical awakening.
With so many cultures, I mean, I'm originally from Nigeria, and there's so many different cultures. And one thing I like about your book is that you touch on that. You understand the difference of that, yeah, you might live in America, you might live in the United Kingdom, you might live wherever you are. We are still women who truly need to find ourselves. How can a woman who's decided to say, I need to truly get this radical awakening, how can I truly find myself? What would be your stepping stone guide to help someone go through that process?
Well, the first thing a woman who wants to radically awaken needs to do is she needs to get honest with all the crap in her life and in her mind. She needs to really, either talk to a coach or write in her journal. I'm not happy about this. I'm not happy about that. And really do an audit of her life, of how she is currently not living her best self.
Yes.
So the first step is honesty. If we are in denial and we're constantly playing the role of pleasing, fixing, saving, and denying our truth, then we are our own biggest enemy, right? So the first step is to tell ourselves that we are not okay. Then the second step is to tell ourselves with compassion that it's okay to not be okay. And then, because we don't want to get into a panic attack, and then we start acting out and become addicts and get depressed, that's why it's important to work with a coach or a therapist when you start this process. They can get you on the right foot. Then the third step is, now what do I do? What are my choices so that I can begin the journey of changing my discontent to empowerment, changing my fear to courage? And there are maybe 1,000 steps that we need to take, or somebody else needs to take 65 steps, but each one of us can begin taking those steps to truly radically change our lives. It's an act of courage, it's an act of self love, it's an act of self worth, but it is the greatest journey one can take, is to truly begin to live an honest life, an authentic life.
I love another bit I love is the pain into power. That is something that really sat well with me. I thought, yes, pain into power. And in this radical time we're going through, this pandemic time, there is so much pain. But I love your power. How do we equal pain equals power?
It's really training a different mindset that no longer looks at pain as something to resist, as something to avoid or something to blame yourself or blame another. Pain is occurring in our life, and I'm not talking physical pain. Okay, so take that off the table. Mental pain is occurring in our life for one reason only: to show us how we have to grow. So if you are a mom, for example, fighting with your teenager every day, and you're in deep pain that your teenager doesn't listen, your teenager rejects you, that pain is occurring because your old wound of getting hurt and rejected is being reignited by your teenager. Therefore, it's an invitation to turn it into power. If your partner, quote unquote, cheats on you or betrays you and you are all upset, please understand that that pain is here not because he is truly or she is truly evil. It's because your old feelings of rejection, unworthiness, not belonging, not being good enough are being triggered. And then he or she can still be a jerk, sure. But our emotional reactions to events are occurring not because of the event, they're occurring because of something deep. Now, having said that, if you see a child being beaten on the road and you feel angry, that is normal righteousness. So I'm not talking about injustice. I'm not talking about the isms of our world, racism, sexism, ageism. Those demand a response. But again, we can't just lose our shit and get angry all over the place. We have to have a conscious response. So I speak about how our emotional baggage interferes with the present moment. And so we cannot change pain into power. We get stuck in the pain.
Sisterhood is another chapter of my I saw on your I come from a family of girls, and we've been successful because we stuck together. We are always doing things together. My father taught us this from a very early age. He said, "Look, you girls are all you have. Always stick together. Love yourself. Don't feel jealousy towards each other. Even if one is more successful than the other, don't feel bitter about it. Instead, lift that person up." Then I went out into the real world, and I found the real world wasn't really quite like that, in the sense that there's a lot of bickering with women. And your book, one thing I really like in Radical Awakening is that you talk about the importance of sisterhood. And women looking to awake should read, for me, I said, women looking to awake should read your book, as you clearly mentioned this, the power in our sisterhood. But I'm confused now because what my daddy taught me when I was a little girl, we still do. I do it with my sisters, but I haven't found that power with the other women outside, because I see with other women outside, the women, there's a breakage. There is a power in sisterhood. I know that from my own sisters, but I haven't seen that in women as women. Could you help me in how could we women appreciate this beauty of the power of sisterhood and support ourselves more?
Well, it begins with each woman in their own determination that they are going to stop feeling insecure around other women. They're going to stop competing with other women,
I like that.
and stop pitting woman against woman.
Yeah.
We must stand for each other. So when we see the mother at the school drop off looking like a mess,
Mm.
all in without a bra and all her hair all in a mess, we need to go to her and go, you look amazing, how can I help you? And certainly don't put her down. When we see a mother struggling with a kid who's angry and beating her at the airport, we don't judge her. We go to her and say, I see you're having a hard time, how can I help you?
Yeah.
We women judge each other so much. We compete against each other. In fact, we're always dressing up for each other. We're showing off about our parenting for the women. And we need to stop competing. We need to stop being insecure around women because that's why we compete. And we need to stop judging women. And when we see a woman, rocking her natural look, having a hard time with her marriage or her partner or her job, we need to always offer help. I've been there. I get it. I hear you, sister. We are here for each other, not to pit ourselves against each other. And it takes each woman to decide, I'm not going to participate in a war against women, because when I do that, I give the power to the patriarchy. And the patriarchy is not good for me. So ultimately, when I'm good to another woman and she feels secure in my presence, I am helping bringing down the toxic patriarchy. Men are not the problem in the toxic patriarchy. Patriarchy is a system which includes men and women. And we're all co creating the problem together. So, an empowered, awakened woman doesn't wait for men to change. She says the power lies in us when we rise up in a sisterhood.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it and answering it. I think, if I could play this clip, this particular what you've just said, I wish I could play it to the world, to more of women, for us to start supporting us, because I think what you just said is so beautiful. It's not, we just know we should take away our insecurity and just do it. But do you think men could play a role in helping
Yes,
women in that situation?
yes,
There's a role when,
absolutely. Men should play a role by telling us stop desiring us and stop competing with each other for us. We're not very smart, we're not very good looking, and we're not worth it. That's what men should do. Why are you guys competing for us? We're not worth it. Honest men in my life have told me, when I tell them, I don't know why we women want to cling on to you, and I'm just talking about heterosexual, cisgendered relationships, and they go, I know, we're not amazing, we're pretty awful and pretty ordinary and really primitive.
yeah.
So we women need to realize that men are not the treasure and men are not the gift. So men can help us by telling us, stop running after us because we're not worth it. But more seriously, men can help us by not objectifying us so much, by asking us questions, by getting to know who we are on our soul level, by avoiding the urge to catcall us on the road. I know it's hard because we are beautiful, but we want to be known for more than our beauty or our looks or our body or our youth or our hair or our nose. We want to be known for our essence. So men can help by taking the time to communicate to us that our essence matters. They can also take the time to listen. They can also definitely stop interrupting us. They can speak up for us when they see inequality on the road, in the cafe, or at the job. They can pitch in more at home. They can allow us to not feel like we don't have to be perfect. That's our job, but they can help.
Yeah.
And in all these ways, men can release us from our own internal oppression, because now we are oppressing ourselves. But men can help us and take accountability for the ways that they have participated in our oppression as well.
Your quote, you very much talk about anger and anger transformed. Lots of anger. Anger is something that's part of our relationship, but it's there's so much anger around. People are so bitter. People are so angry these days, and I sometimes ask people, well, just relax. But it's in people nature. How can we prevent anger? I know it's such a weird question to ask, but how can we prevent it from coming?
Anger is a normal response to the injustices of life. Anger is a normal feeling, just like every other feeling. It's what do we do with the anger? How do we express the anger? Do we just get angry, or can we express anger? A peace rally is expression of anger, but it's not getting angry. There's a big difference between expressing oneself. I mean, I took years to learn this and I'm still not good at it. Like to say, I'm angry because my boundary is being violated. Can you help me not violate my boundary? It's making me upset. Versus yelling, screaming, and breaking the other person's things because they violated your boundary. Big difference. So anger is necessary. Anger is powerful. Anger means a boundary has been violated. And we need to step up into our own ownership of that lack of boundary and see what we can do. We have choices. To get angry is unconscious reaction. That's not conscious anger. So there's a big difference, and we need to learn how to harness our emotions no matter what they are.
My favorite chapter in the book, I have to confess, is chapter 22. And I would ask everyone to read chapter 22 because it's all about accountability. Accountability. I think we say things, we want things to happen, we want that change, and radical awakening is all about that, creating that change for the sisterhood. But we want it. But the thing I think that always hold everyone's back is that accountability, that taking ownership, embracing it. Like in chapter 22, actually chapter 21, we talk about, we always say, victim, your storm, is my own problem. Blame, we do the blame game. And you said clearly, it's time to steer the ship. This is why I want people to read this. Because after reading chapter 21, once you get to the end, you are a totally changed person. But time to steer the ship. Could you explain how can we change accountability and time to rise and start to steer our own ship?
So part of steering the ship means that you understand you're on a ship. So our ship right now in this modern world and culture, toxic culture we live in, is to understand it has white supremacy on the top and it has patriarchy on the top. That's the ship. We need to see how it manifests in all sorts of nepotistic and corrupt ways and exploitative ways against women, women of color, and men of color. No one is spared under the toxic patriarchy. The white man is not evil. He's part of a system where white supremacy is at the top. So I don't want white people to get all upset. It's not about anyone in person. It's about a system that perpetuates. So first understand what the ship is. Now you're on that ship. Being on that ship, you have choices. And taking accountability means taking charge of the choices that you can take charge of. You can support more people of color. You can support more women. You can buy only at certain stores. There are lots of choices you make as a consumer, even though you're part of a cultural matrix that is toxic and poisonous. You can choose not to oppress yourself just because culture oppresses you. You can choose to make mental choices that are different. And in that way, you begin to own your co-creation and you begin to make monumental shifts in how you live within yourself. You see, our relationship with ourselves is the most important. And that's the relationship we ignore. So this whole book, A Radical Awakening, is to help women in particular reignite a very powerful relationship with themselves, which comes first and foremost. Once that relationship is grounded in self-awareness and self-knowledge, now very little can shake you from the inside.
Yeah. No, I've never looked at it that way, but I think in the book it really describes it that way in a very subtle way, and I love this. My final question before I let you go, because my advice is to anyone is to just go get the book, because it touches on so many different aspects, and especially in times like this crazy time that we're going in. So you decided to write this book during I'm sure you started this in the pandemic time. Why were you thinking about women in particular? What was it that came to your mind that you realized that I need to target this book for the sisterhood to really get this book out? Because I think this is what, honestly, this is why I really love the book, is because you understood the problem with the gap and inequality that's affected women. And you see, understood that at the same time, we women also need to own some part of the responsibility and take ownership of whatever's happened. We can't just blame society, the men and everything for it, or because we're having babies. There's also reason. But you decided in a critical time to write such a beautiful book, which I would be sending to a few of my ladies who are talking heavily about with women issues. Why now? Why did you come up with such a marvelous book?
Well, the pandemic has exposed our vulnerabilities and our failures as a global community. It's shown us that we have ravaged the earth, we have ravaged the poor, we've ravaged the people of color, and that's why Black Lives Matter rose in the pandemic, because we came to a new sensitivity. Sitting at home, there was a new awareness. And I wrote this book for women because we are at the forefront of the real change. We run our families, quote unquote. We are the core of our emotional systems all around us. Women are in charge more than we realize, but we haven't consciously owned that power. So this book is about consciously owning the power you already subtly own, subconsciously own, but you're sabotaging it in your own life. And it wakes us up to take that power, The men are not holding the power. The system is, but there's a way to take it back in our own individual lives. And this book teaches women, as she's sitting there, as she's upset, as she's eating too much, as she's exhausted and burnt out, taking care of everyone in her life, how she can see the patterns she's co-creating and break those patterns once and for all. So I think it's a permission for women to liberate themselves from their own suffering and to really wake up to a new way of looking at themselves. And that's, if one woman looks at herself differently because of this book, then I would have done my work.
I think you've done a wonderful work with this book. I am so happy that you sent me this book to read because it is truly, truly amazing. And I will be sharing it with my sisterhoods so they can understand that there is hope. Because a lot of people, women, we sit down there, we're worried about what next? How do I get the next job? Especially women who've lost their job, they've lost their confidence, but there is hope. And it encourages us and tells us how to support one another. It's not bad, we could do it. I really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening. And I hope you go get the book at aradicalawakening.com. I'm also doing a course that accompanies the book so people can sign up for the course and they get books for free with the course. And just find me at aradicalawakening.com.
And also now I'm at Amazon in the UK because I saw it on Amazon in UK. So you could also
Fabulous. If it's available on Amazon in the UK, go grab your book. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and I will be in touch with you once everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Thank you for all you do. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.